Okay, today's video is going to be more of a review of the process instead of the actual repair. On this 2017 Ford F250, I had to replace the door lock actuator. This is the old part, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this, and the biggest problem that I found was the instructions from Ford were incorrect, because the instructions say you just have to take the regulator arm out the way, the window regulator arm out the way, and then you can work everything else past it. The problem is, it says you do not have to remove the glass. And on this vehicle, and I'm sure there's others like it, you do have to remove the glass. If your window regulator attaches through this upper hole, if it attaches through that upper hole and not this lower hole somehow, then you have to remove the glass. My figuring is somewhere along the way there was an update to the system or a change, either that or this is for a manual window. It's hard to say for sure, but if the screw was down here and far separated from the glass, you'd be able to get it out. But because mine had the screw up here, well, it's actually a stud coming in off the regulator with a nut going over it, there's just no way to get the regulator out of the hole, because this arm right here has to move forward in order to bring this whole mechanism out, because you bring out the latch and actuator along with the window rail and a piece of shielding. You have to bring that out as one piece, and you just can't do it with that regulator arm in the way. So, a quick review of what you have to do to get the window out of there. I'm going to raise this window up just a little bit so you can see. Let's see. I think we can probably see better on the front one. Yep. But basically, if you look in here on this window, you see that plastic tab? See that plastic tab? It has to push that way, or you can reach around from the other side with your fingers, push in this way, and you have to get it far enough out to where the glass will lift out of that bracket. And the same thing goes for this one back here. Now once it's out of the bracket and loose, you can leave it hanging in there, gently supported, and then you have to come up here, pull this track out all the way around to the front corner. All the way around to the front corner. Once that's out of the way, make sure you have it hanging to the inside of the door. Then you have to lift the window up, bringing the rear side higher, dropping the front end down, and bring it out on the outside of the door. You have to bring it out on the outside of the door. Once it's out of the way, you can take this screw out, move it fully out the way, and have plenty of room to work. Well, not plenty of room, but you have room to work. And there's also one of the other things that's blocked by the window is this is the outside, where the outside door handle goes, and you do have to take it off. There's a nut and a bolt that attaches it, and I'll show you a little bit how this goes back together. But the big deal is this cable comes back around here and goes down here. It's attached up in here with the plastic clip with the push pin in it. That push pin will not come out, or you cannot easily access it without taking the window out. I did find out that you can do it if you stick a screwdriver up in there just right. You can pry it out, the white piece, and then the whole thing will come out, but it still doesn't do you enough good without the regulator out the way. And like I said, there's a nut, and then a bolt goes in there. And what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to be going back over everything, making sure it's in there secure and tight, and then I'll be putting this thing back together. This, of course, is the outside door handle assembly with the wire and harness attached. The tricky parts to getting this in and out are the direction in which it has to move and then getting the rod out of here. And I find that it's easier to take a tool like this with the rod in there and push in and push those two clips out, then put your finger on the other side, hold the rod to this, and it'll slide right out without having much trouble. And then from there you have to work this handle around and get the ball off the end of it. You have to work the handle around and get the ball off the end of it and slide the cable out. Don't have a really good way to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and just stick it back in there right now. And you do have to remember to plug that harness up when it gets to the inside. And there's the linkage going back in. This cable has to slip forward, go back here, and clip through the hole, and then it's latched. It also needs to be pinched under that arm slightly. Now, I probably should have waited to do that because I'm going to have to get this rod connected in there, and that's going to be kind of hard with that on there. That should have been the last step going back together. And hopefully I've got this lined up right. I'm going to snap that back in there. Now I have to wiggle this thing forward to get this edge to clear, to get that edge to clear, and then I can slide it in the hole. And there we go, getting slid in there. Now all I gotta do is go around the other side, put the nuts on and the bolt, tie the wire together. Now that I have that loosely assembled, keys go in the pocket. Window goes down. This flap goes up so we don't get sticky everywhere. And pull that back off in just a minute. We can pull that back off in just a minute. Now we got to see if the door opens and closes. The first step is to close the latch with the screwdriver. We will lock it. It clicks. Didn't release all the way. I have to have some back tension on it, I think. No, that did release all the way. So now I feel fairly confident in opening and closing the door. Well, now that I got the door back to where it opens and closes, locks and unlocks, then we're good on that. So now I can go back in there and finish snugging my bolts down and nuts down, and then move on to the next part of this. And these are T27 bits, Torx bits. Now those are tightened up, so this end of the door is done. The outside of the door is done. So now I got to go back in here and make sure everything else is in here. I did have to take this clip loose and slide it off this bracket, because that's the harness that goes back to the thumb switch on the outside door handle. It was a little bit difficult to get off there because didn't want to break anything. So what I did was I disconnected it here. Then I came in here, lifted this lever up, pulled this lever down, slid it off, and then I could flip it over and get it off of there. But that's the way I did that. Let's see, the glass is all snapped in. All the linkage is tied in back there. One thing I'm not real sure about is how this linkage here is going to line up. I'm going to put a few more things back together, and then I'm going to come back to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the speaker back in. And there are 4 screws and 1 harness connector. all down loosely first. And snug it down, so now the speaker's back in. Next thing to do is put the inner weather stripping back in place. So that's there. So I have that back in place, and one thing you got to do is, this is keeping water out of the inside of the door panel, so you have to make sure you got a pressed in seal there. Pretty easy to do when the vehicle's relatively new. This is a 2017, so it's only 5 years old right now. 5 to 6 depending on the production date. But as it gets older, this is going to be harder and tougher, so you have to do different steps to seal it up, because like I said, that's your barrier between the inside and outside world. Now I think I need to do a test fit on this interior door panel to see if this is going to clear and work right. Well, I got part way on there, so locks and unlocks, so that should be just fine. This is kind of interesting, the way this thing goes in. I figured it would have been a whole lot worse than what it was, but that slides up under there and it latches in place. There, it's latched in place now. Now I got one other connector I got to put in here. This one here has got to connect into that, but I can't get the camera in there to see it, so I'm going to lift it up, get that plugged up, and then get this panel put on. Now I put the window all the way down so I can get my head across there and make sure I had that snapped over the lip. Now we've got push-in clips that go around the exterior of this door, and I got to go back and snap those in. Double checking everything, make sure it's looking right, and it is. Well, that's that part of it done. Now all the bolts that hold the interior panels on all have 7mm heads, and I draw them up a little bit at a time. You want them good and tight, but you want to make sure they go down even. You don't hear any crazy cracking or breaking along the way. Just years of experience teach you that. Taking thousands of door panels off. And just putting the final hand tight on there. And you see my hand kind of vibrates and shakes, quivers, whatever you want to call it, but it's because I'm using muscles in two different directions, one to tighten and the other to provide back pressure so I don't break anything. And those I'd already tightened down, and then there's two little black screws down here, and I'd already tightened those up too, but just going to give them one more feel, and they're good. Nice little light. Now for some of the more problematic things I had to deal with in just getting the door panel off, this piece goes in here and covers that. But if you notice, there's two tabs at the bottom, two locking tabs at the top. What I had to do was I had to get in there with the flat tool across here that was thin enough to get the gap opened up, that I could slide this in there and pull on it. And then I had to work my way down and get to the other one. But in order to get a decent feel for it, you have to get in here on the end, keep your flat bar in there so you can start opening the gap up and move over till you get close to this, and then pull straight out and it'll come out, and then like I said, you move down to the next one. Now the super pain in the rear one was this cover for the door handle. And let me move these switches out the way so they don't interfere with what we got to look at. Okay, this is the way it goes on there, and if you notice we got a tab back here, so you can't start this end. You have to start at the other end. And what I did was I stuck a tool along this edge, actually down more towards here, and worked my way around this hump and back under here until I got this pop loose. Then I worked my way back around on both top and bottom edges, and then rolled it out of the hole. And like I said, it is a super pain in the patootie. Hopefully it's not going to be that big of a pain to go back on, but you can see how the gap opens up as you go forward. And you have to, when you're putting it on, you have to work your way back and push on it at the same time, because you got a little lip you got to drop in there. There we go. Much easier to put back together than it was to take it apart. And I just about had a heart attack because I realized I don't have the power door lock switch in there, and I didn't see the plug, which was about to worry me to death. But this is the plug for it up here, and we can go right through. We can come right through this hole. Right through that hole and get that tucked in. And then we can come in here, plug our switch up, push the wiring back through, and then snap that in place. And let's hit the unlock button so we're not locking ourselves out. Now, I already got the main power window switch plugged in. Now I've got to plug in the power mirror switch. That's all done. Now we go ahead and snap this back in place. And the last part of this puzzle is this corner trim. Now really all I got to do is clean up the door panel where we've got smudges here and there on it. And the one horrific thing that I have to try to do, at least to me it's horrific because I hate these things, I have to try and put this window vent shade or guard or whatever you call it, I got to try and get it back in there. But I'm going to get that door panel cleaned up first and get this thing wrapped up